afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our weekly review of how religion impacts humanity. This week's headlines. The Supreme Court sides with a Catholic adoption agency that refuses to work with LGBT couples. This is in Philadelphia, but there's a similar activity going on in Kentucky. Extreme conservatives aim to commandeer the Southern Baptists. Hungary's parliament passes an anti-LGBT law ahead of the 2022 election. The UK PM's Catholic wedding shows the need for a church-state divorce. The level of support for religion in Australia has been grossly exaggerated. The Pope changes the Catholic law to criminalize the sexual abuse of adults by priests. Saudi women are to be allowed to live alone without permission from a male guardian. And House of Representative member Marjorie Taylor Greene says she doesn't believe in evolution. The Supreme Court on Thursday delivered a unanimous defeat to LGBT couples in a high-profile case over whether Philadelphia should refuse to contract with a Roman Catholic adoption agency that says its religious beliefs prevent it from working with same-sex foster parents. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in an opinion for a majority of the court that Philadelphia violated the First Amendment by refusing to contract with Catholic Social Services once it learned that the organization would not certify same-sex couples for adoption. Roberts wrote, "The free exercise clause of the First Amendment, applicable to the states under the 14th Amendment, provides that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. As an initial matter," he said, "it is plain that the city's actions have burdened Catholic Social Services religious exercise by putting it to the choice of curtailing its mission or approving relationships inconsistent with its beliefs." There's also a similar case going on in Kentucky. See this from the Atheist Republic.
Christian foster care service refuses to sign contract banning anti-LGBT discrimination. So this is in the state of Kentucky. In Kentucky, a Baptist-affiliated foster care provider, Sunrise Children's Services, is refusing to sign a clause in a new agreement with the state that forbids discrimination based on sexual orientation. Currently, the United States Supreme Court is reviewing a refusal by the Philadelphia Catholic Social Services to work with same-sex couples as foster parents. Sunrise Children's Services officials are worried that the disputed clause would compel them to violate their deeply held religious principles by thank you guys, my deeply held beliefs. By sponsoring same-sex couples as foster or adoptive parents. Supporters of the clause see it as a critical defense against discrimination. Chris Hartman, executive director of the Fairness Campaign, a Louisville-based gay rights advocacy group, stated that if Sunrise doesn't want to abide by the new clause, then they shouldn't have access to state money, state contracts, or children in the state's care.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If those are the rules of the state, you're welcome to not follow them, but you don't get state's money. You know, and so once you allow one person one group to do this under the guise of, you know, religion, it becomes a snowball effect. You know, I don't want to, you know, work with adopting kids who are of a specific religion or race or ethnicity, or if the parents live in a certain zip code, or if, you know, I mean, it's a slippery slope. I mean, they're welcome to not adopt LGBT parents. They just can't get the state's money to do it.
Still in the United States, conservative insurgents, some adopting a pirate motif, believe that the Southern Baptist denomination has drifted too far to the left on issues of race, gender, and the strict authority of the Bible. Allen Nelson IV was shown walking to the front of his small church in central Arkansas, stopping in front of the communion table with 3 large crosses behind him and unfurling a giant black flag with a white skull and crossed swords. For several years, the pastor and father of 5 had felt that too many of his fellow Christians were drifting unmistakably leftward on issues of race, gender, and the strict authority of the Bible. It was time, he believed, to take the ship. "We're fighting for the very heart of the Southern Baptist Convention," Mr. Nelson said in an interview. "For a long time, what I thought a good Southern Baptist pastor should do was to send money and trust the system. We can't do that anymore." Mr. Nelson is not alone. He is part of an ultra-conservative populist uprising of pastors from Louisiana to California, threatening to overtake the country's largest Protestant denomination. Next week, more than 16,000 Southern Baptist pastors and leaders will descend on Nashville for their first annual meeting of the post-Trump era. It is their most high-profile gathering in years, with attendance more than double the most recent meeting in 2019, after a pandemic cancellation last year. It caps months of vicious infighting over every cultural and political division facing the country, particularly after the murder of George Floyd. The outcome has the potential to permanently split an already divided evangelical America. Like the Trump movement within the Republican Party, a populist groundswell within the already conservative evangelical denomination is trying to install an anti-establishment leader who could wrench the church even further to the right, while opponents contend that the church must broaden its reach to preserve its strength. For 3 days, thousands of delegates known as messengers, most of them white men, will fight over race, sex, and ultimately the future of evangelical power in the United States. In Hungary, the parliament passed legislation on Tuesday that bans the dissemination of content in schools deemed to promote homosexuality and gender change, amid strong criticism from human rights groups and opposition parties. Hardline nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who faces an election next year, has grown increasingly radical on social policy, railing against LGBT people and immigrants in his self-styled illiberal radical on social policy, which has deeply divided Hungarians. His Fidesz party, which promotes a Christian conservative agenda, tacked the proposal banning school talks on LGBT issues to a separate, widely backed bill that strictly penalises paedophilia, making it much harder for opponents to vote against it. The move, which critics say wrongly conflates paedophilia with LGBT issues, triggered a mass rally outside Parliament on Monday. while several rights groups have called on Fidesz to withdraw the bill. Fidesz lawmakers overwhelmingly backed the legislation on Tuesday, while leftist opposition parties boycotted the vote. Gay marriage is not recognised in Hungary, and only heterosexual couples can legally adopt children. Orban's government has redefined marriage as the union between one man and one woman in their constitution, and limited gay adoption. In the light of his Catholic wedding, Boris Johnson has handed over the duty of advising on the appointment of bishops. Megan Manson of the National Secular Society asks why a Prime Minister should have any business in church affairs in the first place. A head of government will no longer advise the state religion on appointing its clerics because he got married according to the rites of a different sect. It's a story we might expect from a distant, troubled theocracy, but it's exactly what happened in the United Kingdom following Boris Johnson's surprise Catholic wedding. The wedding, coupled with Johnson's infant baptism into Catholicism, means one can convincingly argue he is a professing Catholic, and, according to the Roman Catholic Relief Act 1829, nobody professing the Roman Catholic religion may advise the Crown directly or indirectly in the appointment of Church of England bishops. Thanks to reforms introduced when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, when there's a vacancy for a bishop, the Prime Minister no longer chooses nominations for bishops from a list. The PM's job is to pass a name which is pre-chosen by the Crown Nominations Commission to the Queen. But, as Joshua Rosenberg has argued, it still seems fair to say that this constitutes advising the Crown on the appointment, at least indirectly. If Johnson continued doing this, he could face being found guilty of a high misdemeanour and disabled forever from holding any office, civil or military, under the Crown. So, understandably, Lord Chancellor Robert Buckland, a practising Anglican, is taking on the job instead to avoid any potential legal cases. The whole fiasco raises uncomfortable points about the established church's impact on our democracy. The first point is that anti-Catholic bigotry still lingers on the statute books. The law barring Johnson from advising on bishops is explicitly anti-Catholic. A Prime Minister belonging to any other faith, or one of no faith, could perform this duty without breaking the law. As one source in number 10 said, it's an incredibly anachronistic thing that a Jew or a Muslim could nominate a bishop, but not a Catholic. Australian rationalists have produced a paper on religiosity. See this video from our correspondent Meredith Doig.
My name is Meredith Doig. I'm president of the Rationalist Society of Australia. During the week, we published a major new report, which we're calling Religiosity in Australia. It's 150 pages, it's got over 100 charts, and what we do is a deep dive into how religious Australians really are. Not what the census says they are, but their actual beliefs and their actual behaviour. And I think the results will surprise many people and perhaps alarm some people. For example, we found that 7 in 10 Australians say that religion is not personally important to them. And only 15% of Australians say that they're active in their religious organisation. Only 1 in 5 say that they actually believe in God or heaven and hell or life after death. And the number of people who say that they don't believe in God has doubled from about 20%, in the early 1990s to about 40% a number of years ago. So why did we do this really deep dive into actual religiosity? It's mainly because it's widely assumed that the census results provide a reliable indication of how religious Australians really are. But we now know that that's not true. The census question assumes that people have a religion. It asks, what is your religion? A lot of people answer that question because, in the affirmative, because they think that they're sort of affiliated. They were born into an Anglican family or a Christian or a Catholic family. But actually, the number of Australians who are actively religious is much smaller than the people who say that they simply affiliate with religion. It's important because we know that in Australia, probably as in your country, conservative clerical leaders often claim that they represent a lot more people than they actually do. What this report really showed was that there is a large gap between what conservative religious leaders say and what their followers, even the people who say that they're religious, what their followers say. And these religious leaders are quoted often in the media to say that they represent their followers. There's a huge gap between what the conservative religious leaders say and what their followers say. So I'd encourage you to go onto our website and have a look in depth at our new report, Religiosity in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. She's the president of the Rationalist Society of Australia, and that's the website name that she was referring to. Now, regular viewers may have noticed that we started having a weekly analysis feature in which a news item is gone into in greater depth. This week, it's on the Pope's recent amendment to Catholic canon law. See this from our correspondent, Jason Sylvester.
I'm Jason Sylvester, aka Diogenes of Mayberry, reporting on the history of Vatican lies drawn from research that I've been working on for my new book. On June 2nd, the Vatican released what the BBC writes was the biggest overhaul of the criminal code for nearly 40 years. This is entirely misleading, as all that happened was that it only made it a crime within canon law not to report allegations of sexual abuse by its clergy to their superiors within the Church. However, many critics, myself included, noticed there was absolutely no provision for any mandatory reporting outside of the Vatican chain of command to secular law enforcement. Critics also pointed out that in its pattern of deflecting responsibility and victim blaming, the Vatican still views women and children as temptations who use their devious sexuality to lure innocent priests into sinning and consider it merely a violation of the Sixth Commandment against adultery. Over the past 20 years of ongoing reports of cover-ups of abuse all over the world, the Vatican has repeatedly shown that it thinks it is above the law and that it is not required to report any crimes to the police in the civil jurisdictions where the sexual abuse took place, but is purely a matter to be handled internally. This was revealed when a 1962 internal document was leaked to the world in 2003, which declared, on pain of excommunication, that senior clerics were required to keep the matter entirely confidential and within the Church, purportedly, they claim, to protect the victim. Understanding why the Catholic Church thinks it is above secular law is a factor of its history and the fictions they created for themselves. Over the centuries, these fictions have taken on the appearance of truth in what psychologists call the illusory truth effect. Essentially, if you tell a lie long enough, eventually people believe it's true. It started in the late 400s when Pope Gelasius declared in a letter to the Eastern Roman Emperor, elaborating what is known as the doctrine of two powers. There are two spheres, spiritual and secular, and that spiritual authority is superior. Later popes continually expanded on this notion, culminating in 1302 when Pope Boniface VIII declared to the French king Philip IV, who had dared to arrest and try a bishop in his kingdom, that only the Pope had the God-given right to judge a bishop. This God-given right is itself based on a Vatican rhetorical fiction from 501, built again on Gelasian doctrine that the Church is superior, and that bishops are to be tried by the Pope alone, but the Pope himself is so superior he can only be judged by God. This fiction is known as the Constitutum Silvestri and derives from a council claimed to have been held in 324 by Pope Sylvester, just prior to the Council of Nicaea, created by supporters of the Pope who was on trial in a dispute for the papal throne. This fictional council issued the fictional Canon No. 3, which states the rules for trying bishops by the Pope with no less than 72 witnesses required, and how the Pope is above all earthly judgment and went on to be codified in later canon law centuries later. And now you know why the Vatican believes that their institution and its employees think it is above the law, because it's based on a lie and they have come to believe their own hype. No other organization in the world is allowed to simply think and declare itself above secular laws. Knowing this history, perhaps it is time to hold this institution accountable for its crimes and put an end to their arrogant superiority and obstruction of justice. I'm Jason Sylvester, yes, named after the infamous Constitutum Silvestri and the associated legends of this ineffectual Pope. Thanks for listening, and I hope it was informative.
Thank you, Jason. Shame about your surname. Oh well, we don't get to choose those, do we? Now, Saudi Arabia has got some good news. From now on, it will allow women to live alone without permission from a guardian, a male guardian, bringing an end to a rule that attracted condemnation from human rights campaigners internationally. According to the Gulf News, single, divorced or widowed women are now able to live independently without permission from a male guardian. This development comes after the Saudi kingdom introduced a legal amendment to grant women the right to live in separate accommodation. Judicial authorities have replaced a legal statute stipulating that a male guardian has authority over a woman's living circumstances with a new text stating, "An adult woman has the right to choose where to live. A woman's guardian can only report her if he has evidence proving she committed a crime." This development follows a 2019 decree which allowed women to travel abroad without approval from a guardian, following a series of attempts by women in Saudi Arabia to escape their guardians. Now, back to the States. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't believe in evolution. See here.
Why is there any need to create a virus that can spread rapidly through a population, make people sick and kill them? That's a bioweapon. So we need to be very clear about what was the intent of COVID-19 and these viruses that they experiment with, like some sort of Dr. Frankenstein experiments. These are bioweapons. There's no other reason to create a virus that makes people sick, spreads so quick, and kills people. There's no other intent, but it's a bioweapon. And then our American—
You don't buy. Hold on. Hang on. You don't buy the argument that saying the gain of function is all because we got to take these viruses and we got to power them up to look for vaccines and to look for other solutions in case somehow they come up with this. You don't buy the logic of that. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't buy it because I don't believe in evolution. I don't believe in that type of so-called science. I don't believe in evolution. I believe in God.
Stay tuned on this channel for the live Q&A show, Free Thought Hour. And this week's guest, Pastafarian leader, Dread Pirate Higgs, starting in about 10 minutes. We will be back with our weekly news review on all our platforms at the same time next week. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, set the notifications, etc. Thank you for watching.